Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king? Welcome everyone to DFO's Bird Bombs, 4 and 20 Blackbirds edition. I'm David Suddjian, and Bird Bombs is a focused 30-minute blast of ID info. I'll talk for a while. We'll have some quizzes interspersed using our poll feature in the Zoom webinar and some questions and answers at the end. And tonight I'm being assisted by DFO field trip leader Laura Stedman, who's monitoring your questions and comments. So use the Q&A feature to submit questions and comments, and Laura will present some to me at the end so I can answer them. So tonight we are about blackbirds. And a Bird Bombs fan asked me, why blackbirds? And the implication was that maybe they're easy, or we don't have to focus on them so much. We're familiar with them. But actually, blackbirds are, while some of the identifications are easy, they definitely present some challenges, and they're very important for birders to pay attention to. So blackbirds are a significant part of our birding landscape. They're widespread, ubiquitous. We encounter them all over the place. They're very adaptable, so we encounter them in all kinds of environments that are affected by people. Blackbirds are very vocal, so as we're listening out there birding, they're often something that we're encountering and a part of what we need to be able to identify and deal with. They're abundant, so many of the birds we encounter on a given birding day could well be blackbirds. And they present challenging observing conditions at times. They might be seen at distances out across a field, or in flocks and mixed flocks and lighting conditions that are less than optimal. Places where you're being stenched out by the sewage ponds. Those kind of things make blackbirds really challenging, but very important for us also to pay attention to. So there are blackbirds and there are blackbirds, and all blackbirds are blackbirds, sort of. Some have some extra colors, but not all blackbirds are blackbirds. So tonight we're going to focus on the blackbirds and their allies in a particular family. So we're going to be dealing with these guys, but not so much with the corvids, the raven or the crow, or the starling at all, or the European blackbird even, which was, of course, the source of the blackbird in our little Mother Goose nursery rhyme. So we're looking at blackbirds and allies in the family Icteridae. So we're going to focus on 6 species that I highlighted in yellow, which are the blackbird breeding species here in Colorado. And Colorado icterids fall into 3 different taxonomic groups. So there's the meadowlarks and their allies. We're not going to look at meadowlarks tonight, but that's part of the Icteridae as well. And the yellow-headed blackbird is actually allied with the meadowlarks and not the other blackbirds. Then there's the orioles, which we won't talk about at all, but they're in the Icteridae. And another taxonomic group they call the blackbirds and allies, which is the blackbirds themselves, redwing, brewers, and so on, as well as grackles and cowbirds. So we have those 3 separate groups. And you can see that the different species are mostly in different genera. We love always when we have the scientific name with the double here, like the genus and the specific epithet, Xanthocephalus, yellowhead is always kind of fun. So our focal species are medium to large size species of birds, and I've kind of arrayed them here in size on our page. They're sexually dimorphic. The males and females look differently, and the males are generally bigger, and the sexes can gather separately in flocks. That's not uncommon to see a flock of pretty much all one sex or the other. The males are black with iridescent coloring and sometimes with red or yellow markings as well. Blackbirds are highly vocal. They're calling a lot. It's a key feature for identifying them. We won't really deal with the vocalizations much this evening, but if you're paying attention to their calls, they call when they fly, and you're often flying, and so you can easily tell them apart that way or some to develop. They nest in, they build cup nests, and some are singular nesters, but some are colonial nesters, such as the redwing and the yellow-headed. And the brown-headed cowbird is different yet as a parasite. And blackbirds go through a complete molt in the late summer. And that's kind of an important feature because they actually disappear for a time during the summertime, late summer, even in areas where they're generally present year-round. So I've included on the graph here the occurrence of the red-winged blackbird and the common grackle from my own backyard, my own home in Ken Carroll in Jefferson County. And the red-winged blackbird is present generally year-round, and the common grackle just during the breeding season. But the redwing and the common grackle both disappear after nesting. And they don't necessarily leave the region, but I think they're going off to molt somewhere. And then the redwing will return to my yard area in October. So there's this kind of late summer disappearance, which is kind of interesting. And if you look at local scales, you can notice these kinds of things happening. It's connected to what the birds are doing. So they're going off to molt somewhere else. And the molt happens in certain places where they're safe and where the resources are what they need. So we'll continue with the status and distribution. It's really important to kind of consider the what, when, and where, and ultimately the why of when birds are occurring. So using eBird, we can look at the seasonal blackbird occurrence in the greater Front Range, Denver metro region. You can see the counties that I've selected at the top of the charts here. And we see, first off, that all of the different species, I had to put them on two graphs to fit the great-tailed grackle in this particular presentation. We can see that all the species occur in every single month of the year in this area, region that we're looking at, but that some of them are decidedly rare during the non-breeding season. So those little fine lines mean we don't see those species generally, and if we do, it's a good discovery at those seasons. We see the red-winged blackbird is prominent all year round, and a little bit of year-round presence of some prominence for the Brewers and the great-tailed grackle. The others are definitely just breeding season only. And we see a definite peak there in the spring and summertime and then tailing off. So let's take a look at the charts that are associated with that so we can understand a little more deeply what's going on. We see the frequency on the left, and we notice that all the species are detected most frequently from March to July, in that spring arrival and then breeding period, and then they trail off, and except for the cowbird, there's a migrant bump in the fall. And if we look at abundance, we see the red-winged blackbird is much more abundant on average than the other species, with the common grackle being the only one that gets close, and then the other blackbirds that we're considering are all much less numerous on average. And they all show a fall peak when flocks of migrants create high counts, except for the cowbird. So we'll continue with our Front Range metro county graph here in the center, and we can look at the mountain counties on the left and the prairie counties on the right. And all I want to see here is the redwing still predominant everywhere, but we can see that the Brewer's blackbird in yellow becomes predominant, more prominent up in the mountains, less so out on the prairie here in yellow. And the common grackle is less prominent in the mountain region and much more prominent out on the prairie. But we see the cowbirds with the green line prominent no matter where we go. So we're going to go right to a quiz. So I haven't even presented any ID info, but we're going to see where we're at, and I'm going to see if I can make this work. What we're going to do is we're going to use the poll feature, and I'm going to try to get our first poll up. And I'm going to launch it. Now, when I launch it, it's going to be in the middle of your screen. And you can drag that blue bar over to the left side of your screen so that it's not blocking the picture of the bird or birds. And so I think this poll is open for business. You can take a look and see what you can pick out in this picture from the Lake Meredith feedlot. I can almost smell it right now. And we're not going to spend too much time here, so you got to pick quick. This is just an initial check to see how folks are doing. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here and show the results. And indeed, lots of us saw the yellow-headed blackbirds that are there, and there's also brown-headed cowbirds. So all of the above is correct. We have male and female yellowheads and brown-headed cowbird. There's one male cowbird there, a female up on the railing, and male yellow-headed blackbird, I think a female right there. So we'll stop sharing that one, And we're going to see if I can get to our next page here. So here we are on our quiz number 2 picture, and I'll launch the poll and see what we think. So we've got a single bird in a tree with some, it's not all black, that's for sure. And nobody's going for the Savannah sparrow yet. Okay. So I'll end our poll here and I'll share the results. And we're on a good track there with the red-winged blackbird. It's a female red-winged blackbird, only streaky blackbird, as we'll see a little bit more. So I'll stop sharing there and advance to quiz number 3. And here's our options. So we've got a generally drab brownish bird facing away. We don't see any particular field marks really. You can see the bill is kind of conical and not so pointy. So that could help us. So we'll end this poll and I'll share the results. And this is a female brown-headed cowbird. Notice the conical bill. That's going to help us a lot. Otherwise, it does generally resemble the Brewers pretty well. I'll stop sharing that and move on and do one more quiz picture for now. And this one could be a bit tricky. Here's our choices. So these guys aren't too close and we can't see much detail. We do see that they're generally blackish. We see some pale eyes. And I see that there's a female down on the bottom that's paler brown, and she seems to have a little bit of a face pattern. None of them have an especially large tail. So it's definitely less than half the body length. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And we're kind of mixed here, but these are Brewer's blackbirds. So we'll come back to why. Let me stop sharing. Close that feature and we'll continue on here. So red-winged blackbirds, first one we'll take a look at in some detail. So this is a widespread species that we see we think of it as kind of all over the place. But they do prefer wetlands and other areas where there's some moisture component. They also travel around a lot when they're foraging. They are abundant, but you know they're on a declining trend in Colorado, according to the North American Breeding Bird Survey. They're smaller than the other blackbirds we're considering, except for the cowbirds, and they have a sharp, pointy black bill. The males are generally pretty obvious with the red and yellow shoulders. You know, sometimes that yellow fades to a whitish. And so certain seasons, they can appear like a red and white, which can trigger thinking about another species of bird, the tricolored blackbird, but we don't have that in Colorado. Also, in the non-breeding time, after the males molt, they have rusty edges on their feathers, as we can see in this top left photo, to a lesser or greater degree. And the young males even more so than the adult males. But at that time, they have these rusty edges on their feathers. So the females are streaked below, and they're the only streaky blackbird that we have, except for the juvenile cowbird. So if you see a well-striped, streaked bird, a little bigger than a sparrow, you're thinking, you know, female redwing. And they recall a large sparrow, and they often have some color in the front part of their face, either gold or reddish tones, like on this pretty picture of this female here. It's kind of red. And we can see the flocks separately. Now, redwings make a ton of different vocalizations, so it's a really good one to pay attention to and learn the different calls. It's one of those things where you're not sure where it is. It must be a red-winged blackbird, right? So here we have some females across the top carrying nest material, carrying food, which they're doing right now, because right now, soon, the juvenile redwings will be out. Some may already be, but we're ahead of the main part of fledging. The juvenile red-winged blackbirds, as we see in the picture here in the center, look a lot like females. And in general, juvenile blackbirds of whatever kind we're talking about tonight resemble females. Even the males that may be black later on start out looking kind of like the brown female, streaky in this particular case. So they'll be begging a lot. They have pale gapes where the two mandibles come together. It's pale colored. It's usually pretty clear. You're looking at young birds. Which ones they are may depend on other details. So in the picture of that diving male, you can see the tail is not especially rounded even when it's fanned out in this particular picture as he's diving down. And those yellow edges on the red epaulets, could become like white, but that doesn't make it a tricolored blackbird, which has not been recorded in Colorado. Yellow-headed blackbird, males certainly unmistakable. These guys are widespread, but they're common only in certain parts of Colorado during the nesting season. San Luis Valley, the northern Front Range area, and then out up in North Park. And they like to have denser marshes with deeper water, a lot of emergent vegetation. The males, can hardly be mistaken with that yellow head. They're big. They have the white in the wings. The females are a little less showy. They'll have yellow too in the face and throat area and breast, but not over the top of the head. And they look kind of dumpy and portly to my estimation, especially compared to the males. A little smaller definitely than the males, but bigger than the other blackbirds. And often when you're around yellow-headeds, especially in the nesting season, they're making some noise and very distinctive, raucous, strangled calls. Here we see some different flocks. The one picture, you can see some red-winged blackbirds mixed in. Get a sense they're being a little smaller. I wonder about the picture on the lower right that Dale Pate took. I didn't have a chance to ask him, but I see there's a blackbird right here in the sort of center that looks like it's a brown head, and you can see that its wings are definitely smaller than on these yellow-headeds and a little shorter. And I don't know about the tail. The tail shape looks a little different. I'm wondering if these are brown-headed cowbirds, even though they don't look all that small. But anyway, some yellow-headed blackbirds, generally pretty easy to identify. The Brewer's blackbird is pretty widespread, but it's more of a western distribution as a breeder in Colorado. So we have them along the Front Range region and then to the west and less so out in the prairie. And they like a variety of open habitats, often with grassland and often near people. So you can see them near our some places where residences are and other things where people have built stuff out, farms and ranches up in the mountains especially, and parking lots. They show up in our parking lots, unlike our other blackbirds for the most part. They're often foraging in little groups of just one or two or three or four or five birds. They're a little larger than a red-winged blackbird with a more rounded tail. They have a pointy bill with a straight culmen. So here's a technical term for you. Oops, I'm off my thing here. Oops. So bird tech term, the culmen is the upper edge or the ridge of the upper mandible. So on the Brewer's blackbird and the redwing, it's a straight line. So you can see on the bird on the right, that male. The males are glossy all over and they don't have a strong head contrast. They're not like a hooded effect. Females are drab brown overall and generally paler on the head. The eyes are dark. But if you look close, there's a little bit of a color tone there, often a reddish or a brown tone in the eyes, but they look dark and a little bit of a face pattern shows up. So here we see a couple females across the top, generally unstreaked, drab looking, a little paler on the face, and the males are pretty straightforward on the bottom without a hooded effect. But wait a minute, take a look at this bird on the left. So it looks like a male Brewer's blackbird, but we see it seems to have a lot of contrast between the hood and the body. And let's look careful at that bill because it's got a curved culmen, the edge of that upper mandible. And in fact, we have a common grackle here that snuck in. And so they do look a lot like the male Brewers or vice versa, but the bill shape, overall size, and that contrasty hood are important. We're going to take a seasonal detour here while we're still thinking about Brewer's blackbirds. Very brief to think about rusty blackbird, which is a winter occurrence blackbird here in Colorado. And they are not found during the breeding season, but we like to think about finding them, but we want to look for them at another time of year. And they have the pale eye with kind of a masked effect and rusty coloring depending on male or female to different degrees. The one in the center is a breeding plumage one, which we don't see in Colorado. We get these other kinds during the fall and winter. Common grackle is widespread across Colorado, especially in the prairie portion of the state. all kinds of different habitats, nesting singly in small groups. Think of them as bigger than blackbirds. They're mean, they're aggressive. The bill is big with that decurved culmen, as you can see in this close-up profile here. They have a keeled tail. That means the tail is, first off, the central tail feathers are longer than the outer tail feathers, and it kind of droops and is folded over as they hold it. And they can hold it flatter or more folded, or they can turn it all the way sideways on its end. The tail is like greater than 50% of the body length. And they have a contrasting blue-purple hood, with the body being more bronzy or dull toned. There's still some color there, still brown. The female is smaller and browner than the male, but generally looks similar to him. Grackles are distinctive in their flight, I think. They fly like little rockets going across, very steady and strong flight. And watch for the male's tail being constricted at the base and then flipped sideways sometimes, or held as like the keel of a boat as they're flying along. The male on the right is molting. You can see his tail feathers here look new, and he's got some raggedy ones here that haven't been lost yet. And then notice the juvenile grackle looks kind of a lot like a female. So a great-tailed grackle is really, pretty much generally easy to identify because they're really big with really long tails, and they have a really long spear-like bill. The males do not have the hooded effect of the common grackle. They're more iridescent overall, and they have extra long tails that are much longer than half the body length. And sometimes seems like they don't know quite what to do with the tail. The female is paler brown head and has some kind of a face pattern with a malar marking, a dark line through the eye, and a pale supercilium. They're really loud and vocal, and you know they're around whenever we have great-tailed grackles. So our last focal species is a brown-headed cowbird. Widespread and ubiquitous. We kind of see them everywhere this time of year. A nest parasite. They like cows. They're small and kind of in a sparrow size range. And look for that conical bill. It's distinctive among all the blackbirds. So you often will see them mixed in with flocks and other blackbirds with them. The bill shape, in addition to the small size, is a good thing to look for. The male has a brown hood, kind of flat brown, with a glossy black body. The female is unmarked pale brown. She has kind of some fine streaks underneath in some appearances. Some look less streaked, a little paler on the throat. And then we have juveniles that are coming out around this time, and they are streaked and kind of buffy blonde. So in this picture here, you can see a juvenile in the center, juvenile cowbird, that pale bill and that streaked appearance. And several other things here. A juvenile cowbird that's just recently fledged with a Wilson's warbler. They're still sporting some down on the top of their head, but they're going to lose that and look like this one here in the top center for a while before they kind of disappear on us. And then the males will molt after they are done nesting. The young males, as we get into early fall and mid-fall, you might encounter some that are blotchy looking. And those are birds that started out looking like this juvenile in the middle, and as they get into an adult type male plumage, they can sometimes be all blotchy and kind of confusing. There's some nice males displaying in the bottom part. So now we've got a fast burst of a bunch of info, and we're going to continue with our quiz. So I want to see if I can put our, oops, I've got to go back up. See if I can get my holes back up. Okay, and I'm going to go to quiz number 5 here and launch our options and see what we can do with this one. So we've got 2 birds walking around on the grass. Looks just like today. And one looks a little smaller, a little drabber. And we see pale eyes and we see iridescence. So we know we're in the group of the common grackle or the Brewer's blackbird. Maybe it's 2 of them because sometimes they could be mixed, right? But, generally not. If you just see 2 birds, right now it's going to be a pair of the same species. And so we'll end the poll and I'll show you the results. And indeed, these are common grackles. You can see the male's tail in particular is kind of constricted at the base and then broadens out and with longer central tail feathers. And he has that hooded effect. The female we can see less well. So she's just kind of a drabber version of the male, but he's giving it away. You can see her pale eye, though, a little bit as she's looking down, which would eliminate the Brewer's blackbird. So we'll stop sharing here and continue on to the next picture. And I'll throw up bowl number 6. So here we have a bath time. And we can't see all the bird, but we can see some important parts. It looks like it's really enjoying itself. So it's, again, it could be a grackle or a brewer's, right, with a yellow eye. We'll forget about the big great-tailed grackle because it's got a little tail. In fact, the little tail is going to help us, as is the fact that it's nicely iridescent on the lower part of the body. So those features are going to help us decide that we have a brewer's blackbird, which indeed most of you got as your choice. A little tough to tell on the common grackle, but again, I think you can sense maybe a lack of hood, but also that bright iridescence on the body and the tail being relatively short and not long central tail feathers like the common. You can't see the bill. All right, so I'll stop sharing that result and we'll continue to our next picture. So this one, we have an inset with a little closer view, and I'll launch our options. So what's going on here? Because that is a strange looking tail. That tail has a tail to tell. So maybe this is tricky, but I think that we're looking at a bird that has a relatively long tail. I see a hooded effect of the color where there's a distinct color on the head and upper breast, and then it becomes brownish or kind of brown toned in the color. And I think the bill is fairly hefty. So I think this is a common grackle that's molting. And we had a mixed sense of the various choices here. We're going to rule out the great tail because of the smaller bill and the tail. We can see how long the tail will be by the retained old feathers, and it's not going to be that long. It is going to be pretty long, but it's pretty worn out there too, so it's hard to get much of a sense of it. But I'm going to go with the common on that guy. So I'm going to stop sharing. We have one more quiz picture. And here we've got 2 different birds, and here's our options. So we got one smaller, one bigger. They both have pale eyes. They're both generally all black. One has a really long tail. One has a less long tail. You can see the longer central feathers on the right-hand bird are distinctive among the grackles, and a really big bill. We got different combos between the great tail, the brewers, and the common grackle, or maybe a male and female of one of the species. So I'm going to end the poll. I'll share the results, and we're kind of mixed in our choices. But I believe what we're looking at here is a great-tailed grackle on the right and a brewer's blackbird on the left. So a common grackle would have more of that kind of hooded effect, even though the body is colored dark here. I think you still would discern that, and the bill is too small. And the tail, you can see the central tail feathers on that left-hand bird, the brewers, are not longer. So that's going to help us eliminate the common grackle. So there's our poll here. And so I want to thank those people that contributed pictures for this bird bombs. If you want to be a photo contributor, let me know. But I'm grateful to Mitchell and to Anne, Pat, and Ron LaValle, rest in peace, recently deceased. Judy and Dale and Linda, Diane, Pete, and Gary. I really appreciate you guys helping me out with your pictures, making it possible. Our bird bombs are available for viewing shortly afterwards. We'll have this one up at dfobirds.org. If you go to the programs page and past programs, you can view the past bird bombs there. Our next bird bombs is coming up on July 14th at 7 p.m. and it's Summer Hummers. So, you know, a CFO is going to do a great workshop on hummingbirds on the 10th of July, and I hope everyone will participate. Our bird bombs uh, on hummingbirds will be covering some of the same ground, but it'll be different. So even if you participate in that, this is going to be great too, or one or the other. So we're going to have a hummer focus as we get into July when we really want to focus on those guys. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and we'll have a chance for Laura to share some questions with me if there is anything. So
thanks, David. I don't see any Q&A at the moment, but I have a couple of questions. First, I thought that was really great. I learned a few things, and those quizzes were harder than I expected them to be, so that was great. I was curious, do you have any, you mentioned rusty blackbirds being here in the winter and not in the summer, kind of the opposite of a lot of our other blackbirds. Do you have any sense of where do they spend their summers?
So the rusty blackbird breeds across the southeast, and this is bad because I'm going to pull up a field guide. So I don't want to tell you guys wrong information. So I've never actually seen a breeding plumage rusty blackbird, and it's going to be kind of cool to do that. I have to go where they are clearly because I'm not going to see them here in Colorado. So actually their wintering population is the southeast, and we're just like along the margin of that, but they're breeding across the northern region. So you'd have to go up, in northern Canada into Alaska to encounter them.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And then, I've seen cowbirds parasitize lots of, Wilson's warblers, yellow warblers. Do you have a sense of, have you ever seen anything else that's really crazy in terms of brown-headed cowbird fledglings with an unexpected host?
Well, they have a wide variety of things that they've selected as hosts, and if you read the literature, you can see it's an amazing array of different species, even ones that don't seem like they're suitable. And one thing I saw that was interesting was American goldfinch, because the cowbirds depend on the juveniles are fed insects by warblers and vireos and things like that, but the American goldfinch feeds its young seeds and things and not insects. So there's again different diets. That was a little unusual, but cowbirds, if you look in the literature, is like such a wide variety of things. Almost anything that's an open cup nester, they'll give it a try. Even things that are a good deal larger than they are.